And Miyazaki even said it will drastically change the gameplay. It's not a minor thing. Why, hello there. It is 150 days until Elden Ring comes out on January 21st, 2022, and this is the Elden Wait. So right now we are in this magical spot with Elden Ring where we know some of the major ideas and none of the details. Some of the major things we've learned from the gameplay trailer and from the interviews that Miyazaki did after Summer Games Fest and E3 are, it is open world with more classic Souls dungeons. You have a mount, that there are weapon skills that you can customize and swap between weapons, that you can summon the spirits of enemies and have them help you out in battle, and that NPCs will be more important than ever, and there will be more choice about how you move around the world, and there will be many endings compared to the Souls games. I've seen the sentiment going around that these claims are like subject to change, and From Software has a habit of saying certain things will be in and then they're not, and that basically that things will change. And I think that comes from a history of things like Dark Souls 2, where there was the torch mechanic and the lighting system changed with the final product, and then with Dark Souls 3 there was the whole sacrifice, make your own bonfire mechanic. So there's a bit of a history, but I wanted to take a look at the recent releases from Software and see, did they really promise things that didn't come to fruition in the final release? So first, let's talk about Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 released at E3 2015. It was officially announced at the Microsoft show. The big takeaways that came from the interviews following and the trailer and just the first couple months as we were getting to learn some of the aspects of the game were faster and smoother combat, that bosses will have phases, and that there will be interconnected levels like Dark Souls 1 or Bloodborne, and sort of the big one was that there will be weapon arts. And Miyazaki even said it will drastically change the gameplay. It's not a minor thing. These things all ended up in the game to some degree. It's subjective how successful they were, but I would argue that all of these elements ended up being true of Dark Souls 3, at least to some degree. The levels are more interconnected than Dark Souls 2, for instance, which is some of the context. There are weapon arts in the game, the bosses certainly have phases, and the combat is faster and smoother than the previous two Dark Souls games. But what about that sacrifice ceremony mechanic? So that was part of the infamous The No leak for Dark Souls 3 that happened just before E3 2015. And this was not an official announcement by From Software. This was a leak. And the only word that Miyazaki really gave on it was that he did reference it and promised more information later. And that never ended up happening because the mechanic was cut. But Miyazaki never really promised anything about creating your own bonfires. This was all leaked information. And this is not a huge item, but something that did come up was Miyazaki did mention in a few interviews about the gravestones where you can offer up flame and you get this little lore story. And that was in the network test, but that ended up being cut before the final release. So that is one small instance of something Miyazaki talked about that didn't make it into the final product. So all in all, I'd argue that the major things Miyazaki talked about did end up in the game. It's subjective as to how successful they were or not, but they did end up in the game. And unsurprisingly, rumored mechanics from leaks were the things that did not end up in the game. But Dark Souls had a much different context than Elden Ring, where it was the third entry in a series, and a lot of the discussion was about how it compared to Dark Souls 2, how it would tie into the legacy of Dark Souls 1, but this is a new IP for Elden Ring, so I think it makes sense to at least take a look at Sekiro, which was also a new IP and a recent release from Software. So I'm going to talk about Sekiro once it really kicked off at E3 2018, and this is going to be pretty short because Sekiro really delivered on all the major points brought up, and Sekiro is a lighter game mechanically than the Souls games, so I think that adds into it. But the major things that came up were light stealth, approaching situations in a variety of ways, the Clash of Swords combat system with a posture mechanic, and the one thing they did consciously hold off talking about was the death penalty in Sekiro, and as we learned, that was something that they were playing around with and did go through a number of changes during development. But I think what we're seeing here is indicative of a game that has less systems. It's a bit more focused on, like, there's more time spent on the animations and stuff, but as far as like the number of systems and mechanics that could be pulled out, there were less of them, so they were able to focus on what they did have, and they delivered it without really having anything cut from sort of what they were offering up during development. So between Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro, we don't really have a perfect comparison for Elden Ring. Sekiro was a smaller scope for a project, and Dark Souls 3 had the whole legacy of Dark Souls and being the third entry in an established franchise going for it. But I think a good takeaway is that the context is important in each of these cases, and it's something that's hard to judge until we can look back on it. But with Elden Ring, this is a new IP, and I would say generally that From Software has been able to deliver on the major mechanics and sort of conceptual promises that they're making and the goals that they're setting out with this title. So I think a lot of the things that have been talked about in sort of these broad strokes about Elden Ring right now, I think we can expect them all to show up in the game. I don't think any of it really is going to be cut because they haven't really cut anything like that since Dark Souls 2, and that was something where they admitted that they sort of made a mistake showing it off that early, and that having to pull out that lighting system was a mistake on their part, and they haven't really done anything like that since then. And so stuff like the bonfire sacrifice ceremony mechanic, that was leaked information. That was not supposed to go out and be disseminated to the public, and probably because it was something that they were wrestling with and ultimately ended up cutting. So I would say look forward to your open world, look forward to your mount, look forward to the weapon skills and the NPC spirits you can summon, and look forward to all the NPC interactions and the more organic way of moving throughout the game and the increased number of endings. That doesn't mean that they will deliver your wildest dreams. I would certainly keep your expectations in check, and as we learn more details, I know on this channel, one thing I love doing is as we learn more information, it helps to hone in understanding what the game is, and when we come to release, we have a much better idea of where From Software is coming from. So we'll keep sort of bringing the game into focus as we learn more information, but as long as you keep your expectations somewhat in check and it's not just these wild assumptions about any of these bullet points, but that they will exist there, if that all sounds good on the most basic level, I don't think that there is anything that won't be delivered with what they've talked about so far. I think we're in pretty good shape. It seems like they've learned in the past not to say things unless they are feeling like they're in a pretty good place with it, and it's only 5 months until the game comes out. So while things can change pretty rapidly, as is proof with Dark Souls 3, I think that we're in pretty good shape and that everything sort of pitched for Elden Ring right now is stuff we will see to at least some degree in the final product. So there you have it. Let me know what you think. Do you think they will deliver on anything there? Is there anything else mentioned in an interview that I did not bring up that you think is very integral to the identity of Elden Ring here? And what are you looking forward to getting more information on the most as we get into Gamescom this week? I am certainly looking forward to, if not a Gamescom in the coming months, seeing gameplay footage just to get an idea of these systems in action. And I think what the open world actually contains is probably one of the biggest questions we have. I understand what you do in a classic Souls dungeon, but as far as what you're doing in the open world moment, I have no clue. And I think an uncut gameplay segment could really help with that. But let me know your thoughts, what you'd like to see, how you feel about what we've heard about Elden Ring so far, and I'll see you for the next Elden Wait.